We first start with the Hilchot Pesach, since we're getting close to Festival of Passover and there are many halachot to cover, so we just give a vignette and then we go to the Daf Yomi, page 155. The halacha I would like to share with you is from the Shulchan Aruch, Taf Ayin Dalet, 474, Al Kos Sheni En Mevarchin, that one should not make a bracha, a blessing for wine, over the second glass of wine during the Seder. Shote kos sheni ve'ein mevarech alav. One should drink the second of the 4 glasses of wine, but should not make the blessing for wine over it. Lo bracha rishona ve'lo bracha achrona. Not a blessing before, prior to the drinking, nor the after the blessing. Mishnah Brura, ve'af al gav, although the drinking of each one of the 4 glasses of wine, which the sages ordain that one should drink on Seder night, constitutes an independent mitzvah, the order of the Shulchan Aruch is of the opinion that it is nevertheless unnecessary to make a blessing over each individual glass. This is due to the consideration that one does not distract his mind from drinking between the glasses, since when he makes the blessing over the first glass, he knows that he will be drinking another glass. And then he said, the prior blessing, Borei Pri Agafen, should only be made over the glass which serves for Kiddush, and over the glass which serves for the blessing for after the meal, and the after the blessing of Al HaGefen should be made except following the 4th glass of wine. So the requirement the Mishnah Brura said to make this blessing over the 4th glass will be discharged by means of the blessing which he will make over the 3rd glass. And you see that in the Haggadot, in the Passover Haggadah, except following the 4th glass. Now the blessings for after a meal conclude one's meal and involve withdrawing from further eating or drinking, so that having said them is considered a complete interruption with respect to the prior blessing. That is why the blessing which was made over the glass which served for Kiddush cannot serve for the 3rd glass of wine, and despite this, one will nevertheless not have lost anything with respect to the after blessing, though having made a blessing for after a meal. The reason is that having distracted one's mind from further drinking does not oblige one to make the after blessing immediately, but he may still wait until after he has drunk all the glasses before he make it. Then he will discharge his obligation to make an after blessing for the 4 glasses with a common blessing. Now we go to the Rema, Vehaminhag, and the practice among Ashkenazim, the Jews from Europe, is to make a prior blessing over each one of the 4 glasses of wine. However, according to the practice also, the after blessing is made solely after the last glass. This accords with the view of the majority of the Geonim. Let me share with you some point before we go further to the Daf. It was the idea of having a halacha right by the great writing of Rabbi Yosef Karo, the great Sephardic rabbi. Very short abbreviation of history. It was the great Maimonides, about 800 years ago, who said that it will be a time that they reinstitute the Sanhedrin, And the condition is that all the rabbis will gather together, and they appointed the head of Sanhedrin and all the subsequent rabbis. It was a great attempt by the Maharibei Rav at the 16th century in Sefat, in Israel, to get all the rabbis and institute the Sanhedrin, following exactly the instruction of the Rambam. According to our resources, it was an objection. There are two versions. One said it was the chief rabbi of Egypt, one said that it was the chief rabbi of Jerusalem. The key point was, with all the plan, everything fall apart. It's either because the Rambam said that that's apply only to Rabbi in Eretz Israel, and then the chief rabbi of Egypt was insulted, or the chief rabbi of Jerusalem objected. But in any case, since that plan fall apart, the only way to do a substitute for Sanhedrin, it was to put in writing the entire halachot, which made a monument work by Rabbi Yosef Karo and his disciples in Sefat, 16th century. When that came to Europe, especially to Poland, which has a very large Jewish community, the rabbis there have two choices. Either to make another Shulchan Aruch, another code just for Ashkenazim, or to deal with the Sephardic Shulchan Aruch in some way and incorporate something that a practice applied to Ashkenazim. It was a man of God, the Ramah, Rabbi Moshe Isserlich of 1550, that have the wisdom, the vision, the understanding, the brilliancy to incorporate within the Sephardic Shulchan Aruch interlineary explanation of how Ashkenazim does their minhagim, and in that way to keep the entire Jewish community in unity. That was one of the huge contributions that apply to this contemporary our days. So for example, if you have Sephardim, the minhag, to pull out the Sefer Torah and show it to everyone before the Torah reading, he wrote in interlineary that Ashkenazim does that after the reading. So when it's come to a 4 glass of wine, the code, the Mechaber, Rabbi Yosef Karo said that the Sephardim does it once before and once after. Ashkenazim, the Ramah, Rabbi Moshe Isserlich, Ramah is abbreviation, Resh is Rabbi, Mem is Moshe, Aleph is Isserlich, 1550, put that the practice among Ashkenazim is to make a prior blessing over each one of the 4 glasses of wine. So now we understand that there is a different minhagim between Sephardim and Ashkenazim, and we respected both minhagim. Some go by the Mechaber, some go by the Ramah. The daf we're going to study, 155, is a fascinating daf dealing with ha'achalat ba'alei chayim b'Shabbat. It's a law concerning the preparation of food for an animal on Shabbat. It's many halachot, there are many different types of food, and therefore we start with the Mishnah at page 155. Matirim ki'ei amir lifnei behema. One may untie pirkei amir, it's packages of grain, before an animal on Shabbat. Umefasfesin et hakipin afalo et hazirin. That one may spread the kipin, but not the zirin. So several things I like to share with you because it's a very important to conceptualize what's involved here. I would like to begin with Shinkav Dalet. I'm reading from the code, the law concerning the preparation of food for an animal on Shabbat. One may not sieve straw on Shabbat with a sieve, so that the chef should fall on the ground, and one may not put it in a high place so that the chef should drop down. However, one may take straw in the sieve and put it inside the manger. So, and basically what involved here, the way that Rashi said, they tie twice. If you go to the field and you look how cow, horses fed, So you go to the field, you have those hay piles. How do you call them? That they tie twice? Hay?
Yeah, bales of hay.
Bales of hay, thank you. Now, we have an issue, because in one hand we do not cause the animal, not allowed to cause the animal any sorrow. On the other hand, we don't want to violate Shabbat. For the animal to go and untie those bundle hay, it's an issue. It's very difficult for some animals. Therefore, the Mishnah said you're allowed to go ahead and untie those bundles in order for the animal to feel comfortable eating it. And also, you're allowed to spread the food before the animal, so it will be easy for the animal to eat. In those days, they used to take those about grass or hay and put it before the animal. Why? Because over the day, when it's hot outside, if they are collected together, it's carry a bad odor, and the animals smell it and they disregard it. That's what Maharam said, Rashi said. So they said that's fine as long as it's tied once or twice. But if it's too tight, zirin, it's tied 3 times, very deep bundle tie. Then it's an issue. The Gemara later explains. Ein meraskin lo et hashachat velo et hacharuvin lifnei behema. He said that one may not crush hay or cherub, charuvim, before an animal on Shabbat in order to help the animal eat, in a sense, in a comfortable way. That's called as pasta. And they said ben daka, ben gasa. Behemat daka, it's considering anything that is small, like a lamb, like a goat. That's behemat daka. Now, from now on in this year, when I use the word daka, please remember I'm referring to goat or lamb. When I use the word gasa, I'm referring to cow, horse, donkey, ox. Okay? Why? It's because on Shabbat you're not allowed to have extra arduous effort for that. In other words, you have and you're allowed to go ahead and prepare food for the animal, but you're not allowed to go to extra effort to make it look very pleasant and beautiful and wonderful and spend tremendous amount of time of preparation like you may do during the week. Why? It's considering by halacha molid, which means you're creating something anew, and taking and crashing that is the issue of tochen. Tochen, you remember we talked, it's one of the melachot, one of the labor that forbidden in Shabbat. It's called tochen. It's like grinding, and the grinding issue is only apply if you're planning to do it in the future, not for the immediate use. So if you're planning, the Rashba tells us, if you're planning to do it right away, you're planning to serve the animal right away, that's different. But if for the future, you cannot do that. Rabbi Yehuda, the last part of the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda matir bacharuvin ledaka. Rabbi Yehuda permits to do so with charuv for daka, for animal, it's small animal, because what happened with daka, they have a very small teeth. It's not well established strong animal, and therefore they cannot eat in the same way as the strong ox can eat. It's a very different category, and therefore you're allowed to go ahead and do for the behemat daka, for the small animal, crashing charuv. Halacha is going by Tanakama and not by Rabbi Yehuda. Now we go to the Gemara. Amar Rav Huna, hen ki'in, hen kifin. So he said that both, they are both called pki'in, and they are also called kifin. Is no different between the two, because you're talking about a hay that was bundled as a package. So it's the difference between the two is pki'in trei, kifin tlata. When you tight kifin, you have two way that you pull the knot around and tie it. In kifin you have three tie. So the difference is that there is a concept that's called kesher shel kayamai, permanent tying. So he said, in that case, you can untie those tie on Shabbat in order to serve the food for the animal. And then he said, zirin, the arzei, there are cedar trees like you have in Lebanon. So those one, they have a very wet branches that use. So he said, in that case, vehache ke'amar. That's the way you should understand it. Matirin pki'ei amir lifnei be'ema. You're allowed to go ahead and untie pki'in of grain before the animal. U mefasfesin, you're allowed to scatter, which you're allowed to go to the tircha, to the effort, and spread them. And vehu hadin, and the same is true for kifin, lekifin. Why? Because it's kvar ochel, it's already food, and therefore you're allowed to go ahead and do that. Now, usually those type of cedar they use for in those days they take it, they dry them out, and they use it to heat the houses. They don't use it much for feeding animals. Now he said, אבל לא את הזירים, לא לפספס ולא להתיר. But zirim you're not allowed to do it, neither to spread them, not to unite, to untie. Why? It's because they are prepared for heating. That's the purpose of that branches, of that wood. Amar Rav Chizda Maitama de Ravuna. Rav Chizda asked, what's the reason of Ravuna? כסבר למיטרח באוכלה תרחינן, לשווה אוכלה לא משווינן. Meaning, to prepare the basic food before your animal, it's considering in our language, ready food. You have a ready food for. Let's talk in a human language. Let's say you have a ready food in a refrigerator. The only thing you need to do is to open the package, put it on a plate, put it nicely, and serve the people. Versus if you need to start from scratch and start preparing the food. It's two different categories. So he said, if it's already made food and you need just to beautify it in order to serve, that's fine. But something that you do holada, like creating a new, that you're not allowed to do. So therefore, if you have a bundle hay, so it's considering a food before you fix it, according to him, you're allowed to go ahead and untie them and scatter them before the animal, even there is some effort because it's already made food. However, a cedar branches, because it's not considering a food, we said earlier that it's for heating purposes, you're not allowed to go and untie them and scatter them before the animal, because it's considering a holada, you creating a new food. Rav Yehuda Amar, hen pki'in, hen zirin. There is no difference between 2 times, 3 times. The whole idea is pki'in trei, zirin tlata, kipin de arzei. So here we talk about kipin is the soft branches of cedar tree. Vehache ke'amar, and that's the way you should understand it. Matirin pki'ei amir bifnei be'ema. You allow to go and untie the amir before the animal, the grain before the animal. אבל פספוסי לא. But however, to scatter, no לא מפספסינן. So because you do not open it untie, because it's not considering a food. וכיפין, but the branches of a cedar tree, פספוס אינם מפספסינן, since it's considering an אוכל, it's considering a food, you're allowed to scatter them, אבל לא הזירים לפספס אלא להתיר. You're not allowed to scatter them, just to untie them. אמר רבא מייתמה דרב יהודה, why רב יהודה allowed to open it, to untie it? כסבר שווי אוכלה משווינן, מיטרח באוכלה לא מטריחינן. So it means the animal, if there's nothing there for the animal to eat, is a tsar בעלי חיים, it's causing the animal sorrow. So therefore you're allowed to go ahead and prepare that food. However, if you need to make something that it's just an extra effort to make it a special pleasure, that's something that you should not have the effort to do it. So it's a two different school of thought. One speaking about ready-made food to beautify it, and one speak about to make a ready food in order to avoid sorrow, tsar בעלי חיים, but not to beautify it. תנן, אין מרסקים את השחת, you're not allowed to crush hay, ולא החרובים, מנת הקרוב, לפני בהמה, בין דקה בין גסה, regardless if it's a goat or it's ox. מה אליו חרובים דומיה לשחת, you compare hay to carob. מה שחת דרקיחי, אף חרובין דרקיחי. The same way as a hay, it's soft, the same way as carob, it's soft. So therefore, since it's soft and it's wet, so Rashi explained that since they are soft and wet, it's good that the animal can eat it without crushing. And if you crush that before the animal, is just to make them extra pleasure of eating. And therefore the Mishnah said you shouldn't crush them. Alma, lo tarchinan beochla, utyuvte de Rav Huna. What do you derive from that? We're not allowed to make an extra effort only to beautify existing food, existing ready-made food. And that's opposite to what Rav Huna said. Amar lach Rav Huna responded and said, opposite, lo, exactly the opposite. Do not say that it's speaking about carob the same as hay, because carob usually is strong, it's dry. And he said, shachat dumya de charuvin, ma charuvin da kushei, af shachat da kushei. Because both are dry, and because it's dry, the hay too is dry, and that's what the Mishnah speaks. Because otherwise, without crushing it, you cannot serve the animal. And because the crushing them make them as a food, you're not allowed to crush them. So the GEMARA asks, when do you find a case you have a hay that is so dry and strong that even an ox cannot eat it without crushing it? So they said, Be'ilei zutrei. If you have a young, very young donkey, right, baby donkey, so you have to crush it before them because their teeth is not strong enough, Rashi said, to eat it like all the other donkeys. So Rav Huna holds that crushing it is creating food and is forbidden. Tashma, another question on Rav Huna. Rabbi Yehuda matir b'charuvim ledaka. Rabbi Yehuda allowed to use a carob for small animal, ledaka, legasa lo. But if it's for the ox or cow, no. And Rashi said, torach be'ochla, that it's the havel and mitrach be'ochla, that is an extra effort to prepare that food. I amar bishlama, the machloket, the disputation in the Mishnah. You understand, if you go by the Amorah, by the Rabbi Yehuda, that hold תנקבה סבר מטרח באוכלה לא תרחינן שווה משבינן. We not crash a cherub because anyway in order to beautify it, but you're allowed to do the preparation of that food from something it's not food. So here we talk about hay and cherub, that it's that when you're crushing it is only to make it extra pleasure for the animal. Hainu de ka'amar Rabbi Yehuda hacharuvin, that is a cherub that is soft, you're crushing it. Dakanamei shavei ochlao, that even a goat or a small lamb, a small animal, it's a food, and because otherwise the small animal cannot eat cherub. And Rabbi Yehuda allow it. Why Rabbi Yehuda allow it? Because otherwise it will be tzar ba'alei chayim. It will be a great sorrow for the animal. They cannot eat it. They don't have the teeth. They don't have the preparation. They small. The lamb and the goat, they small. They cannot eat it otherwise, and it's sorrow for the animal. Ela yamar. But if you tell me, according to Ravuna, that we are talking about strong cherub, Tana kama savar shave uchla lo moshivinan. The first Tana hold that it's molid. It is creating. So he said, you don't make a new food for something that is not food yet. Mitrach beuchla matrichinan, as we said earlier. But if it's already made food, you can beautify it. And he said, Rabbi Yehuda matir b'charuvin ledaka. Rabbi Yehuda allowed to eat cherub only for the small animal, because it's an effort in that food. Kol sheken legasa, and for sure for ox, for big animal. Mi savart. So here you see that is a question. And he said, Mi savart daka, when you tell me that Rabbi Yehuda hold it's a small animal, daka mamash, it's applied to really small one, small goat, etc. My daka, gasa. What he meant by daka, he meant gasa, big. V'amai karela daka. Why use the term daka? The daika be'ochla, because she need to swallow it in the mouth, or he, right, very aggressively and again until they can put it in. So Rabbi Yehuda not allowed to crush cherub, only for the gasa animal that can eat. Why? Because it's not a special effort, since the animal can eat it anyway. But the small animal cannot eat without crushing. Rabbi Yehuda forbade to do what? To crush cherub. So the GEMARA has when we say that you should not crush neither hay not cherub, ben ledaka ben legasa, michlal de Rabbi Yehuda daka mamash. So it means that it's a really small one. So we back to the question on Ravuna. Why Rabbi Yehuda forbade to crush cherub for gasa, for a cow or big ox? Kashya. So it's a really question on Ravuna. Some Gaonic said that it's not an unresolved question, it's just a challenge. Because that very moment, they could not, the Rosh said that they couldn't find a right resolution right away. But the Ran tried to resolve it. Anyway, Tashma, come and see another question that we can ask from the following Mishnah, which we're going to study in Mitzvah Hashem, and 156b. Mechatchin. Just turn the page to 155b. Mechatchin et adluim lifnei הבהמה ואת הנבלה לפני הכלבים. One may chop the pumpkins before an animal, and an animal caress before the dog. So here we talk about something that is detached from the ground. Otherwise, is a biblical prohibition to do it, because it's called kotzer. You are basically cutting from the ground. So usually pumpkin is for people. But that's not the reason to make it a set aside, make it a muktzeh. That's what Rashi said. So we said we're allowed to do it, and he said, "My love gluim dumed lenevela manevela derkichav gluim derakichei." You can compare The pumpkin, too similar to an animal carcass. Carcass, yep. Thank you. The same way as the animal carcass is a soft. So the same thing, pumpkin refers as a soft. Alma, what you derive from that? Tarchinan be'uchla u'tshuvta de Rav Yehuda. It means that we have, and a person can exert himself with food, and that's the refutation of the opinion of Rav Yehuda. Amar lach Rav Yehuda, lo, nevela du'med dluim, ma dluim da'ashuna, af negevla da'ashuna. The same, he go the other way. He says the same way that the pumpkin are hard, so an animal carcass is also hard. So in chopping is rendered edible. So the Gemara asks, give me an example that's applicable. The b'sar pile, this is elephant flesh. So iname beguriata izutre, you have a small little puppies. So small little puppies cannot eat heavy meat, right? Let's exaggerate and say the puppy cannot eat the flesh from elephant. Okay? Tashma letane Rav Chanan min ha'ardea mefarchinan teven ve'aspasta u'marvin. So Rav Chanan min ha'ardea said, one may crumble straw of alfalfa on Shabbat and mix the two together, and the animal then eats the straw because it's mixed with alfalfa. Alma tarchinan buchla. So you see that the person can make an extra effort, he can exert himself with food on Shabbat. So the Gemara response said no. They said no. Teven betivnas tsaria aspasta beilei zutre. Teven, they speak about a rotten straw. So what happened? So it's not good for food until you basically scatter it. Because if it's a fully rotten, it's already muktzeh. Because that's, you make a building in those days, and the Ramban Meiri said that it wasn't for use for animal. And aspasta and alfalfa is for young donkey. So young donkey, the Meiri said they cannot eat only in a very small piece that you basically scatter it. Let me, before we go to practical halacha, I would like to share with you just one halacha in Shinkav Dalet 324. אין חותכין שחת, פירוש ירק של תבואה שקצר טרף שנשבטלה תבואה וחרובים לפני הבמה בין דקה בין גסה משום דבלה חיתוך נמי חזה לאכילה. He said here, one may not cut up premature cereal grass, which means green cereal grass that has been reaped before the grain is reaped, or charuv, kerub on Shabbat, in order to feed them to a small or large animal, because even without being cut up, they are also feed for them to eat. So now you see clearly the code just basically repeats what we learned. Now we're going to the Mishnah, and the Mishnah said as follows: En ovsin et hagamal velo dorsin velo mal'itin. Now the Mishnah speaks about how to feed animals on Shabbat, and the Mishnah said that there's a two category. In one hand, we don't want the animal to suffer, we want to feed them. On the other hand, we don't want to make an extra effort because it's Shabbat. So therefore, the Mishnah Berurah tells us in Shinkav Dalet, let me again, with your permission, take another moment, but it's very important. He said in Tet, one may not cram food into a camel on Shabbat, feed it so much food with his hand that his stomach will become as wide as a manger. So he said here in the Mishnah Berurah in Kavdal 24, all this is forbidden because it constitutes excessive exertion, which means you're like overfeeding them. Usually they do it for the camel. Soon you see it in the GEMARA. And he said, even sometimes when you're feeding the animal, let's say the Meiri said you go on a journey in a desert, so you don't have a place to buy food for them. So in those days they used to feed them a lot, but you're not allowed to do it on Shabbat because it's a tircha yetira, it's an extra effort to do it. However, mal'itin meaning you may place food in the camel's mouth, and that what's the real difference between the avisa and drisa? The avisa is the measure, it's the measure that's supposed to be good for him for 2 or 3 days, for the camel. Drisa, the Meiri said, it's something that's sufficient only for that day and nothing more. So they said, ve'en ma'amirin et ha'agalim, you also not place food at the mouth of the calves. Aval mal'itin, but you, on the other hand, you do it in the manner of the halata. Umehalketim latarnegolim. Malketin, it means that you prepare food, force feed chickens. ונותנים מים למורסן אבל לא גובלים, and they one may add water to brand use as animal feed, but one may not knead the mixture. Kneading, it's lisha, it's forbidden, at least for a rabbinic prohibition. So they said, ונותנים מים לפני דבורים ולא לפני יונים שבשובח. And why may not place water before geese and or before doves in a dove cote? Why? Because they go out and eat in the field. We have two categories. One, that you are responsible to feed. It's like your dog. You are responsible to feed your dog. But you have a certain animal that it's not your responsibility to feed. So therefore, since not your responsibility, you are forbidden to do it. אבל נותנים מים לפני אבזים ותרנגולים ולפני עונים ארדסיות. So Rashi explained, because all of this is under category of pet animals that you keep in your house, so one may place water before geese and chickens and before Herdesian doves. It's all animals that you use as a pet in your house, so you have to feed them. So now the Gemara go to definition. Said, "My end of sin." What does that mean? That one would forcefully overfeed. So they said, "Amar Rav Yehuda, en osim la eivus betoch me'ea." You not feed animal that it create too much in their stomach. That the stomach, the intestine will get bigger. Give me an example of what that it's how much you can feed camel in such a level that his intestine will become bigger. So they said, yet it's true. He says, I saw an Arab merchant, that guess what he did? He took Korah, he fed his camel with a core of food. Core of food is like, according to Reb Chaim Naeh, 249 liter, or Chazon Ish 432 liter. It's a tremendous amount of food. And then he loaded it with another core on his back. So the Tosfot in Bava Metzia Pei Bet, I'm just quoting the Tosfot, Dibur Matchil Stam. The Tosfot said, quote, חוץ משאר המסוי וכן נראה דאין סברה שיוכל להאכיל הגמל אפילו על ידי אביסה כדי מסעו בפעם אחת. He says it can be that in one time you feed a camel in such amount. So he hold that it was the two packages on the camel. One is the food for immediate, one is the food for upcoming trip, and the other side is to keep the balance on the other side of his back. That it means core and core. Then the Mishnah said, "En ma'amirin," you not place food in the mouth of the cows. So he said, "Eizo hi amra'a ve'eizo hi al'ata." Give me an example that it's an extra effort in המראה and ההלעטה. אמר רב יהודה, המראה, when you feed the animal forcefully למקום שאינו יכול להחזיר. So you put it in an animal in such a place that which it cannot return it, that food. Which means that it's inside the throat. So it's an extra effort. הלעטה למקום שיכולה להחזיר. הלעטה that the camel can put it back. Rav Chisda disagree, and he said, "Idi v'idi lamakom sheyichola lachzir." Hamraa bekli alata biyad. He says, no. The difference is that hamraa, it's using a spoon or using some utensils, and alata, it means that you're feeding the animal with your hand, because otherwise it's considering tircha yetera, an extra effort. Mativ Rav Yosef me'alkitim l'tarnegolim v'ntzach malkitim. So Rav Yosef said that he said that one may force feed the chickens, needless to say that one may malkitim. So he said that because it's two different way. One is more forceful. You feed the animal. You see that your pet or whatever it is not eating, so and you're concerned, so you force it much harder for them. How you feed those doves that up, especially on Shabbat. It's for sure you cannot force them on Shabbat. What's the real difference between the two? Which means you use your hands to put it inside the animal's mouth. The same the other. The other one, it means that you put it before the animal and they eat it independently by themselves. It's the way that you put the root of the word lamed kuftet, leket, how you take it. Michlal, you derive from that. The yonei shovach v'yonei aliyah mishda kamayu namelo. That this type of dove that it's up on the tree or on the nest, dove coat, you not even put food before them, because Rashi said it's a extra effort. Elalav. So what? You're going not to cause them sorrow? They're not going to be fed. מהלקטים למקום שאינה יכולה להחזיר, ומלקיטים למקום שיכולה להחזיר. So it means that you put it in a place from which it can return and expel the food. So Michlal de Hamra'a, the prohibition that we learn in the Mishnah, is forbidden bikli. It's applied to the utensil, truth to the Rav Yehuda, and that's the opposite of what Rav Yehuda said. So they said, Amar la Rav Yehuda l'olam me'alketin desaf elei biyadayim. Malketin has to be that he feed them with the hand. U'malkitin deshad elei kamayu. The malkitin, it means that he put the food before the animal's mouth. Then you ask about the dove that you should put at the front of the before doves, and in a dove coat you put a dove in the attic. You put this food. So hanei mezonotav alecha, hanei en mezonotav alecha. You have certain animal that it's your obligation, because the Ramban said ticha shelo letzorech. If you need to feed animal, it has to be letzorech, that it's your responsibility.
If they're dependent on you.
Dependent on you. The Torah said atau be'emtecha, and you and your animals. So all those animals, it depend on you.
But these doves are free to fly out of the attic and out of the coop anytime they want, so they can get food themselves.
Correct. So Hashem taking care of them, but not you.
Right.
So they said, Amar Ravashi, Matnitin dam medaika. Ravashi said that we learn also from the Mishnah that אין נותנים מים לפני דבורים ולא לפני עונים שבשבח. You don't put water before bees and before the attic dove in the attic, אבל נותנים מים, you put the water לפני אבזים, לפני תרנגולים, לפני עוני הרדסות. You put it before all these light animals, geese, chicken, etc. My tama, what's the difference between them? La mishum dehane, meaning those chickens, for example, mezonotav alecha, you are responsible, they depend on you. Vehane en mezonotav alecha, the others, they go and eat in the field, it's not your responsibility to feed them. So, they said, uletamich, my area. So according to your explanations, what's the difference? Did I skip about Kelev and Chazir? No. Yes? No?
You went over it quickly. But
okay,
yes.
So I just want to make a point over that. The difference between dog and a pig. The sages put a special curse against those people who raise pigs. This is a famous Gemara in Sota 49. So therefore, we're not responsible to feed them. But you're allowed to raise dog as long as he's behave and as long as he's a loyal, good dog. That's Gemara in Bava Kama 79. So if you have a dog, it's your responsibility to feed the dog. Uletamich mai iria maya. Why the Tana used the word water? Afilu chite v'sare, even a barley or grain. Namelo, it's also forbidden to put before them elashan. Because you have water that it's found in the lake or other place of reservations. So therefore, you cannot put it before bees and before the dove in the attics. But some food that they don't find, like a grain, like a barley, so then you're allowed to go ahead and feed them. So you don't feed a pig that you're forbidden to raise, or because he has enough food, okay? But anyway, the halacha is according to Rav Yehuda that forbids to give the food before any animal that it's not in your responsibility. So there's a very well-known question in Shinkav Dalet. He mentioned that people who in the Shabbat Shira in Parashat Beshalach, when is the song of the animals, is that Shabbat there are people who take a crumble bread and put it before the birds. So it's a big question: should you do that or not? Because it's only food that they have it, and not make an extra effort for them. Anyway, the Rash Rabbi Yonah Pitcha de Benesia. Rabbi Yonah was in the gate of the house of the president. Mai dechtiv, what does that mean when the King Solomon said in the Mishnah, in the book of Proverbs, Yodea tzadik din dalim, the righteous know the judgment, take knowledge of the cause of the poor. Yodea Kudush Baruch Hu bekelev shemzonotav muatim. God knows that the dog have a little food that people usually don't feed them enough. So therefore, therefore, his digestion system take 3 days. So it will be enough for him. Kidetnan, the Mishnah said in Tractate Shabbat, they're dealing with the law of purity, chapter 11. A dog that ate a flesh from a corpse. So they said, now it's in a state of contamination, right? How long it's in his stomach and is considering impure. So they said, Bekelev 3 yamim ma'at la'at. By the dog is 3 days. Ubofot bedagim. However, when it's come to the fall and the fish, kedei shetipol la'u v'tisarev, which means that the dog have 3 days of digestion. There is a concept that's called tuma blu'ah, because the impurity is inside the dog's stomach, so it's not contaminated, it's not carried at tuma. Amar Rav Nuna. From that we learn another thing, that God is so strict to give a nourishment to the dog. He said, Shma mina orach ara lemishda umtza lekalba, that people just throw a bone to the dog. V'chama, and how much? Hamar Rav Mari mashach udnei v'chutra batrei. Rav Mari said that they give him very little. They give him just a little bit, the size of a person's ear, and then he uses stick to warn the dog not to come again, and not to run after him to come again and get the food. And the Gemara said, Hanemile bedavra, that's only in the field. Aval bemata, in a city, you shouldn't feed the dog that is not used, the atel misrach, because then the dog will go after you all the time. He wants to be fed, and then it costs you a lot of money to feed the dog. And they said, Amar Rav Papa late the anya mikalba. ולית דעתיר מחזירה. He says there is no creature poorer than a dog, and there is no creature richer than the pig, because the pig can eat anything, and he eats a lot, and the dog was depend on the people, and he eats selective items. And basically, Ben Yehoyada said that that's not literal, it's a very deep mystical message here, but we're not going there. Tanya Kvatei de Rav Yuda. Ezoy Amra ve'ezoy Al'ata. What is Amra and what is Al'ata that you allow in Shabbat? Amra מרביצה ופוקס פיה ומאכילה קרשינים ומים בבת אחת. So מרביצה, he forcefully open its mouth and open and feeds it vest and water simultaneously. Yes, it's a very forceful way. הלעתה מאכילה מעומד ומשקה מעומד נותן לו שנים לפני עצמם ומים לפני עצמם. Is while he give it while they drink, while they're standing, give food to drink they in the usual way, and then the other one is give it in a way that the animals go and eat on their own. Then the Mishnah said me'al ketinat tarnegolim, one may force feed chicken. Omar Rabbi Amrita de Kamei Demar, which is Rav Yosef Matnitin Mani, who learned this Mishnah. ואמר לי רבי יוסף בר יהודאי דתניא, אחד נותן את הקמח ואחד נותן לתוכו מים, האחרון חייב, one who places flour and another one places water into it, the later is liable to bring a sin offering for performing a prohibited labor of kneading. Lisha. דברי רבי, that's the word of Rabbi Yosef בר יהודה אומר, אינו חייב שיגבל. One is liable only when he kneads the flour and the water together. As long as he didn't do it, he is not liable. So Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda hold that putting water in this flour, it's not considered kneading, because this eruv is not the essence of fixing that food, but only kneading. That's the Chazon Ish Orach Chaim Nunchet. So they said, דילמה, עד כאן לא קמא רבי יוסף בר יהודה התם, אלא כמר דבר גיבולו, אבל מורסן לאו גיבולו, אפילו רבי יוסף בר יהודה מודה. So we hold that it's all apply in the flour which is be kneaded, but in the case of bran, which cannot be kneaded into a dough, even Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda will conclude that it's prohibited. So GEMARA disagree and said, לא סגד הדרת תניא בעדיא, אין נותנים מים למורסן, דברי רבי יוסף בר יהודה אומר, מתיר מים למורסן. So it means in the conclusion, the GEMARA, that Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda is not divided between something that needs kneading or not. Now, it's an important book, it's called Eglei Tal. So he explained that this is a very big disputation in regard to kneading, that Rabbi Yosef hold that it's because you combine the dough, the flour with the water. And that's happened right after putting the water. Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda hold only when you make it as like one entity, and it's only made by kneading together. So they said Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Ein govlin et hakali v'yesh omrim govlin. One may not knead on Shabbat a sweet flour made for unripe grain that was drying in the oven, and others said that you can do it. So basically this one is something that is drained in the oven, and it's always sweet. That's the GEMARA said, that it's always sweet. Ma yesh omrim, who was the opinion that said it? So Amar Rav Chizda said, just a little bit in 156 to finish the sugya. 156a, Rabbi Yosef bar Rabbi Yehuda, that he hold that putting the water on the flour, it's until it's kneading. So v'animilehu de meshane, as long as you make it shinui, you make it in an atypical way. Heicha meshane, Rav Chizda al yad, slowly and surely he made this shinui, make it different in a very slow manner. Veshavin, both Tanakam and Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda both said, שבוחשים את השתית בשבת ושותים זיתום המצרי. So they both said that if it's you're doing it in a very short way, so you can do it, and it's not considering kneading. Zitum HaMitzri, they use it usually for people who have a constipation, but it's not considering a medicine. Ve'amarten govlin, we just said that you're not kneading. Lo kashya ha be'ava ha beraka. It's different between if it's hard or soft. Ve'ani mileu de meshanei. Echem meshana ma Rav Yosef bachol noten et hachomets. Rav Yosef said during the week he put the vinegar. So Rashi here said the word klomar. Ken darko bechol. We're running out of time. Please read it in my book, explanation what Rashi meant. And they said, ואחר כך נותן את השתית, and then he put the flour. בשבת נותן את השתית, ואחר כך נותן את החומץ. The Shabbat is the opposite. Levi, story. Levi, ברי לרב הונא בר חייא אשכחי לגבי לדבנשה, he found the one who was guard for the animal of his father, the kagavil, that he put it in a shinui in an atypical way, וספל אלתו, and he forcefully fed his ox, which means the one who is in responsibility, batashbe, he bite him. Or some say that he is just beaten him. So again,
kicked him, it says here. But
what did they say? Kicked him.
Yep.
Right. So basically, the whole idea is that if you do it in a blila raka, in a soft one, it's different. But here, you hold that what the Mishnah said that you cannot put neat mursan in Shabbat. It's even, the Ritva said, even by atypical way. Ata avu ashkechei, his father saw him, amar leia, achi amar avu deimach, mishmei derab, umanu Rabbi Yirmiyah barabba, govlin velo masfin. So we allow to go ahead and govlin and knead, but we're not ma'amerin, velo lakit belishnei, and a small calf that doesn't know how to eat, malkitin levu ani meshani, but he make it in a different way, in different manner. Hechem meshana maravir mavashlam mishmei abaye shtiva erev. He said that the way that you do it, it's in an atypical way, one horizontal, one in two different manners. V'halo ma'arav shapir. So it's not combined properly with the water. Amar Rav Yuda mena'aro lakli. Rav Yuda said that Rashi said that he take this stick and he combined it and he put it in a different utensil, and this way it's combined nicely, and that's the way he can keep it. And Rambam Hilchot Shabbat chapter 21 elaborate on that, but again we're running out of time. We just go to the practical halachot. Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 324. One may untie bundles of grain on Shabbat, but may not spread them out for an animal. This principle is one may render edible something that is not edible. However, he may not exert himself to further prepare food that is already edible. Others said that the sages permitted untying a bundle of straw only when it's tied with a temporary knot. One may not crush hay or carobs for either large or small animals on Shabbat because they are already soft and edible. However, the Mishnah Berurah said it is permitted to crush hard carob. Then we said that the pumpkin on Shabbat, one may cut hard pumpkin for an animal provided that the pumpkin were picked before Shabbat. That's what we mentioned Magen Avraham in 324. On the Shabbat is permitted to cut an animal carcass for dogs, even if the animal died on Shabbat itself, provided that the carcass is too hard for the dog to chew. However, if the dogs could eat it uncut, one may not exert himself and cut it. One may not forcefully overfeed the animal on Shabbat. One may not cram food into a place or in its throat where animal cannot expel it. However, it is permitted to place food into a place in an animal mouth where the animal can expel it. That's different. Also, we say that if one may not place water or food before animals capable of finding their own food on Shabbat. It's not depend on you. But one may do so before animals for which his responsibility for their sustenance is incumbent upon him, upon the person. That Shin Kavdalet 324. And also we explain that the Hamarayin al-Hata, one on Shabbat, one may not force an animal to the ground and forcefully feed it water and veg simultaneously. However, if the animal is standing, one may feed it water and veg separately. That's the Tosefta said. And the last halacha we mentioned in regard to gibul and Shabbat, one may not stir a large amount of flour made from roasted barley into liquid all at once. It is permitted to mix flour made of unripe roasted wheat with vinegar, provided the mixture is watery. However, this is provided if the mixture is thick, because it looks like kneading. On Shabbat, one alters the manner in which he prepares the shatit by adding the vinegar to the flour instead of the weekday method of adding the flour to the vinegar, and that's the Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 321 and the Mishnah Berurah as well.
Shula